Okay, good morning again. This is our second panel, and I'm really happy to present the illustrious guests that we have here. The topic this morning is women in film. Does it make any difference whether they're in Hollywood films or TV productions or independent films or TV productions? Does it get easier? Is it easier today, or is it more difficult? And also, women in film also encompasses women who review films, and that's why we have several of our women film critics up here, starting with the head of the Alliance for Women Film Journalists, Jennifer Marin. Next, some of you met Miss Tilly yesterday, Jennifer Tilly. You're going to see her in tonight's movie, Bound. And make sure that the microphones work. We used to have a microphone for everyone. What happened to all the microphones?
I need my own microphone.
And
Hello.
Gina, I always pronounce your name Gershon.
It's Gershon.
Gershon.
Like French.
Gina, actually I pronounce it that way too sometimes, and that's how I pronounce it from now on.
So it's not Gershon.
Oh no, Gina Gershon, who you'll also see in Bound tonight. We have Stephen Apcon here, and he's not just a token male. We actually had other men who were going to be on the panel, but I don't know where they are. You just can't depend on them to show up. But actually, Stephen is on the panel for a very good reason. He is the one who started the Jacob Burns Film Center in New York, in Pleasantville, and it's a very important film center for independent filmmakers and just for the love and propagation of good cinema. So Stephen Apcon. Next is Nell Minnow. Nell is a multi-hyphenate. She is a lawyer, a brilliant woman, a film critic, and also she does so many things. She's just I just have to say this, and I hate it when I say this about her, but it's so true. She's such a good person. I love her. So Nell Minnow, and she became the first woman editor at RogerEbert.com this year. Next is someone whose film I'm really looking forward to seeing again. Rita Coburn is the documentary maker who made the movie about Maya Angelou and Still I Rise. So you'll see her. Welcome, Rita Coburn. And last but not least is Karla Renata, who is also known, her moniker is the curvy critic. And I like that. She has curves, and both mentally and physically. Beautiful, well-rounded curves of thinking, of doing. She's also multi-hyphenate. She's also an actor, and she just published a new book called
The Actor's Guide to Self-Marketing, How to Promote and Brand Your Unique Image.
All right. So, thank you. I wanted to have this panel for several reasons. The first reason is because Stacy Smith at the Annenberg School put out a bunch of statistics over the last few years about how little women were either behind the cameras as directors or even with talking roles on the screen, and just how this whole industry pretty much minimized the role of women. And I saw that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. And so we're going to have Karla actually is going to start with some statistics.
Yes, ma'am. So, as Chaz mentioned, the Annenberg Report is a report that comes out yearly giving statistics about people's positions in all lanes of the entertainment industry. And the recent one said that underrepresented females are invisible as composers. There's only 1 out of 301. The Hollywood image of a female director is a white woman. 39 are white, 4 are African American, 2 are Asian, and 1 are Hispanic. The female directors, there are 46 individual female directors between 2007 and 2018. 46 between like almost 11 years? That's really bad. Just saying. Producers are primarily pale and male. That's not me, that's what they said. Just to be clear, 72.3% are white male producers, 16.3% are white female producers, 9.8% are underrepresented male producers, and 1.6% are underrepresented female producers. And the list goes on and on and on and on. But one more I'd like to tell you before we continue is the female gaze is also missing in films. 8 directors of photography are female, 5 are camera operators, there are no female gaffers, there's 1 best boy electric, 4 female grips, and 8 female best boy grips. So that just gives you an idea of how disparaging the diaspora is when it comes to male and female in the industry.
Thank you. You know, last year there was a movie that came out about a woman director that most people, even people in the industry, had never heard of. It was about the director Alice Guy Blaché. She was one of the first women directors. Her name, she should be as famous as the Lumiere brothers and Edison, because she was one of the first women who started her own studio, both in France, she was French, and in America. She had a studio in New Jersey. She produced or directed over 1,000 films, and most people hadn't heard of her until this documentary. I want to start off with our panelists, either the working actors on the stage. Actually, Jennifer, you're a stage actor as well, and movies, movies. Yes. So between the three of you, Gina or Jennifer, we're going to start off. Tell me, first of all, is it a valid question to even separate Hollywood movies from independents? 1, and 2, is it easier or harder for you to get work these days in either area?
Well, in my career, all the really good roles that I've done have been in independent films. Like, for example, Bound was an independent film. In major motion pictures, I usually would play sort of the wacky sort of, I don't know why, like, like the secretary, or I would have a very small part, because in major motion pictures, the leading lady usually has to be really hot. And a lot of times they cast models in the leading parts, right? And actually a friend of mine was cast in this movie where she was supposed to, it was a major motion picture, I'm not going to say her name in case I misremember the story, but she was supposed to be like this really kick-ass warrior, and so she cut her hair really short. And after the first few days of dailies, one of the producers went, "What the fuck? She looks like a fucking dyke. Get rid of her." Oh, sorry about the language. It's really early in the morning. I see a small child crawling around on the floor. I'm just talking about how that's how they talk in Hollywood, and they replaced her with a really pretty actress that had long hair. So that's the kind of thing you're up against in Hollywood as actress. And then when you get older, all of a sudden all the parts dry up. And a lot of the major motion picture actresses, I would say A-list actresses, have sort of migrated to the independent arena. And so now there's not nearly as many parts for independent type actresses, such as myself and Gina.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's just the landscape has changed so much. I mean, when, just speaking from my own personal experience, when I started acting, I was too ethnic, so they didn't consider me American, even though I was like from the Valley, and from California. Yeah, but I did a play, that opened up at Theater Center in LA, and I played an Afghani woman, and it was a really incredible part. So then they only considered me for Middle Eastern roles, which were fine, but they didn't have enough. And then when the actual part that I created on stage was being made into a movie, they said, "Oh no, like we need you don't. How do you know how to do this?" And I was very obnoxious, and I pointed to the playbill. I'm like, I created this part, and they didn't like that I was smart and talking back to them. And I was actually told by directors when I was growing up, when I was like starting out, I remember, talking about a script because I was interested in the whole script, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're very smart, aren't you?" And I'd realize, oh, I just lost that part, which I thought was really bizarre. So, in my own personal trajectory, I ended up, going to independent films more because for the major films I wasn't, white enough. And actually now I'm not black enough, and I'm not Asian enough, and so I keep falling into some weird category. I keep wanting to say oh, let's start the Jewish life matters or something. I'm joking. I don't want to get in trouble with that, but it's So for me, I started looking toward. I just never wanted to be categorized in anything because I thought I'm an actress. It doesn't matter how old I am. It doesn't matter the color of my skin. I can, if I can play it, that's why they have hair and makeup and lights for. And so then I started looking at the guys' parts because I thought that's a better part. And so some of my favorite parts, one of the reasons I like Bound so much is because to me Corky was oh, this is the typical guy part. He's like the hero. He gets the girl. He gets the... Here comes Jen, and he gets the
I wanted
money.
that part. I wanted the part of Corky.
Well,
I auditioned for Corky, and then they met Gene, and it was all over. But they said everybody wants to be Corky. How come everyone wants to be Corky? Nobody wants to be Violet. But you hardly ever get to kick ass in a movie.
Well, it was just a typical guy's part, and I just thought in my experience, and I did a couple other guys' parts too, that I just thought they were better parts. And then they were like, "Oh, now you're playing lesbian parts." I'm like, if those are the better parts, I'm going to play it. I just think the labels are so detrimental. And now, as Jennifer was saying, it just seems like, the big pictures, if you have to be under 30, that's getting old. Or, if you're already very, very established. But in the big movies, it was always there was one woman and a zillion guys.
Yeah, usually 18 to 36 men and then one girl, and she got to be hot.
Well, it's just, and now it's changed a little bit, and the independent films are disappearing, so that's why we have cable. It's you have HBO, you have Netflix, that has become our independent film.
Yeah, there's good roles in television for women.
Yeah, for the women.
I want to go to, one thing I want to say about Gina, that I remember having discussions with Roger about you. And he told me in his interviews, there are certain people that he liked interviewing. And, of course, you're beautiful and all that. That probably had something to do with it, too. I don't know. But what he emphasized was how smart you were. He said that you were, in his interviews with you, he just said that you had a level of intelligence that's not often found in Hollywood. So
that's nice.
Well, what did he say about
he loved you. He loved you, Jennifer. He thought that he said you had this. I'll tell you exactly what he said about you. He said you have to be smart as a fox to play someone dumb.
That's true.
Yeah, so that's what he said about you. So, and this Jennifer tell us, you were in 2 movies last year, but also tell us about why you started the Alliance of Women Film Journalists.
We started because there's a problem. Women are not represented in film criticism. We are more than 50% of the audience. And we think that women's ideas about films and women's needs in film, social needs, their realities, need to be represented on the screen. We need relatable stories. We need our stories to be told. We, in the first year of our existence, encountered AFI's 10th anniversary list of top 100 films. Of those 100 films that were the best films ever made, there were 4.5 that were directed by women. And we said that is just not accurate, it's not right, it's not acceptable. We made a list of 100 films that is entirely different. It's up on our website. You're welcome to go and look at it.
And what is your website address?
www.awfj.org. And I have cards if anybody's interested in any further dialogue with us, because we're always open to that. We have this year done another list. We also did a list 2 years ago to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And that list was the top one, I think it was 100 or 50, I don't know. Oh, it's 55, I'm sorry. Women, fictional characters in film. Characters that actually represent real women or women's concerns. And this year, we did another list of the top 50 women who are real women, who are heroes in their own lives, who are represented in nonfiction films. Their stories are told in nonfiction films. So this is why we started the organization. For me, personally, I am a graduate of Tisch, a very early grad acting graduate of Tisch. And I went to work as an actor immediately out of school. I was one of the students who was accepted into the regional theater program. And wound up actually at La Mama, Cafe La Mama in New York, in a Japanese theater production. I was invited by the director to join his theater troupe in Japan, where I made movies in Japanese.
Domo arigato gozaimasu.
Doitashimashite. And I sang in those movies. I still remember the lines from those movies. It was kind of...
As a Japanese woman?
I was cast in mainstream Japanese films. I was cast as an American housewife, a wealthy American housewife. It's a role that I would never have been cast in the United States. And I also played the director was a very famous director named Suji Terayama. He's kind of legendary. And I played in his films, and in those films I played the angel from hell. Was a kabuki character. I was in kabuki makeup, and I was also responsible for teaching movement to the troupe. So, I mean, this is really, a very confusing career that I've had. But when I came back, I actually started working with Marquetta Kimbrell, who was an actress you probably know, and we were doing theater in prisons. To help inmates. This is a bit about my history. But anyway, getting back to...
and tell us about your films last year.
Oh, well, these were 2 films that I... It's funny, I was a part of a script reading group in New York, and we were reading scripts for directors. And the film is still in production, and I've been told... It's in post-production now, but I've been told don't talk about what it is specifically. But that director is a rather well-known independent filmmaker. And I was invited to actually become part of the cast. It was the first time in 40 years that I'd acted. And I was kind of like, I actually had to go and audition for it. I was terrified. I was like, I'm not going to be able to handle this. And it's a very... it's a very confusing, non-linear, long monologue in the film. And I thought, I'm going to screw this up terribly because I can't remember it. And I did it playing beats initially. And the casting director said, just go for it. And I just went for it. And I threw it out there like mad. And I screwed up the non-logic of it and probably made it logical. And then he said, "That's great. You take direction very well. We'll let you know." And I walked out and I said, "Well, I blew that." And then, several months later, I got so-and-so would love for you to be part of the cast. And I was absolutely thrilled. And then the second one was, I was recommended for by the AD on the first one. And then I just did another one last week that was just a friend said, "Come and be in this." And I did.
I have to tell you, I am delighted to hear that. As a litigator, I used to represent people who were discriminated against on the basis of their age. And under the Age Discrimination Act, you wouldn't believe the age of discrimination. It was the age 40 was considered old. And so this is such a disposable society that they start characterizing people old at age 40 when you're just really beginning to live. And so I'm delighted.
Thank you.
That you're
Can I say
word.
Something about statistics?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to say that these statistics that are being thrown out to characterize this industry are perhaps accurate, but they are not what we should be looking at. There are a lot of women who are working in this business and producing really, really fine films against all odds. We recognize those films on the Alliance website. We do a movie of the week, and they're female-directed films mostly, or they're female-centric films that are telling women's stories that are not being told elsewhere. These are films that have trouble getting recognized. They deserve recognition. These women it's not that women are not producing films, it's that the films that they make are not being recognized. They're not being respected. They're not being made available to audiences who are interested in them. And that is something that we really need to change. We can't keep looking at, we want a bigger piece of that pie. We have to change the ingredients of the pie. We want a different pie. We don't want strawberries. We want strawberries and blueberries and raspberries and prunes. We want the whole kit and caboodle. We want squash in our pie. We want potatoes. It's not, we really have to, as audience members, we have to demand this. And as critics, we have to pay attention to the films that are being ignored. And we need to advocate for those films.
I'm going to move down Stephen, tell us Jacob Burns Center and what you see as the type of films why you choose or did choose some of the films that you chose and what's happening, what you see in the world of Hollywood versus independent for women in particular.
Well, the first thing I would say is that we were recently in the Czech Republic for a panel at an event, and it was a panel on the importance of inclusion. And they were talking about women coming more into the work, and the entire panel was men. So statistically, this is an improvement. It's interesting, when we started the Film Center 20 years ago, 18 years ago, we had all different kinds of series. And one of the series that we had was Out at the Movies. It was movies from the LGBTQ community. And we did that for many years until the sponsor, the donor that funded that series, came to us and said, "You know what? It's a series that doesn't need to be done anymore because it's now gotten to the point where we're just showing those movies and we're encountering them as humanity and not as something that needs to be separated. Yet we still have a women filmmaker series." Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting place to be. I think the question about the importance of independent films versus studio films, I think, is tremendously important because I think that's where the real work is being done. That's where the meaty roles are, and the chance for an actor to show what they're capable of playing. So, for us to be able to see a movie that Deborah Granick made, for instance, with Vera Farmiga or Jennifer Lawrence, or Leave No Trace, or I see Michael Barker out there. A movie like Capernaum, that film with Nadine Labaki is making the film. Those are films that need to be told and seen, and it's not just about the importance for women. It's the importance for all of us. Those are movies I want to see. So I think it's something that we still need to be doing work on, and those are. It's not about celebrating it for one aspect of the population. It's for all of us.
Thank you. And Nell, let's go to Nell.
Thanks, Chaz, and thanks for your lovely introduction. I want to say first that I was happy to write some of the tributes in the AWFJ's list of the greatest female movie characters, and I just have to tell you who I got to write about because they're so great. I got to write about Audrey Hepburn's Princess Anne in Roman Holiday, Tess McGill in Working Girl, and my very favorite, Nora Charles, Myrna Loy in the Thin Man series. No, so go read those. People complain about the Oscars. It's a favorite thing that people do. And when they do, I always say to them, the Oscars are the industry voting for themselves. The awards you want to pay attention to are the night before, the Spirit Awards, which, by the way, this year just tracked my preferences perfectly. So, it's not called show art. It's not called show friends. It's called show business. And if you're making a $200 million movie, like an Avengers movie, then you're going to have to make a lot of compromises. You're going to get a lot of notes. You're going to have to please a lot of people. But if you are Deborah Granick and you're making a movie on a budget of about 2 cents that's set in a public park, then you have the freedom to tell a genuine story. And so that's the difference, I think, between independent films and studio films. And I also want to tell one story that I think you guys will identify with. My daughter's a costume designer in Hollywood. And she told me that there was a very young actress she was working with. She was still a teenager, and she was crying. And she said, "What is it?" She said, "Well, I walked into the producer's office. He didn't even look at me. He just said, 'Lose 10 pounds.'"
Oh.
Today, is it in this world now?
Yes, this happened a year ago. Yeah, and that was a big studio film. And I think it was to intimidate her more than anything else. My daughter, who has literally seen Hollywood actors naked, said, "This girl trusts me." She was a teenager. She had perfect skin and perfect body, perfect everything. But that's still, I don't think they say that to the guys.
I was doing a movie with Carrie-Anne Moss, and it was right after Matrix. If you saw Matrix, you know how skinny and fit she is. And I was playing a stripper, so I had to be skinnier and fitter, and I was on the treadmill every single day next to her for an hour and a half every day, and she said she had a movie coming up. They told her she had to lose 20 pounds for the movie. They sent a treadmill to her house. So, and she was, a lot skinnier than me at the time, and I was astonished at that.
And let's go to Rita Coburn, who is an independent filmmaker.
I think that we have a very broad industry, and as far as independent and commercial films are concerned, we really need more representation across the board for women. So where you can say that there are some films that we're just not hearing about, there are a lot of films that aren't being made because the women can't get in the door. They're not even told to lose 10 pounds because they never got in the room. And until we start to change that, I remember Ava DuVernay said, if we're still talking 2 or 3 years from now about she got $100 million to make a movie and she was one of the first, that's a problem. If I'm stuck with independent films and I'm screenwriting now and I'm working to do commercial work, because the black race or any race is not monolithic. And so we need a lot more voices out there. And I always use this example for what film does to people. In the end, all we have are our own stories. So I remember I used to interview authors, and I remember interviewing Amy Tan, and when the Joy Luck Club came out, in one fell swoop, it passed all of what we found out in history because we weren't being taught about Asian people. After that movie, we saw their historical struggle, we saw their struggle with their families, with mothers, and we didn't see them as just math majors and stereotypical things. We saw them as human beings. So we need those big commercial films in order to say to a very large public, this race, these people are not monolithic. Here they are. This is who they are. And then we think about them differently. And even with the panel this morning, when you talk about addiction and we talk about the deepening of a character, these are our lives that we're talking about. It all nets down to each individual person. So it's really important that we have more of an impact on the industry all across the board. We need more women directors. We need more support for women directors across age. At 60, I still need to be able to work in either field. And so, and when I say either field, as a director of narrative as well as a director of independent historical films. And now you'll find that when you go to do historical films, a lot of the grants aren't there. They don't want a biography. Well, these people are dying. So if we don't get a biography on them now, what are we going to do? Because their history was never in the history books. We didn't write the books. So we have an industry that impacts so many people that we need to be represented across the board. We need the avenue of independent for all kinds of abilities to work, but we also need the big splash that commercial makes in order to change the way we think about people.
And how long did it take after Joy Luck Club when there was another Hollywood movie featuring an all-Asian cast?
25 years.
25 years.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's where we lose the momentum. We have a Black Panther, we have something, and go, oh, and it's a post-racial nothing. We need more work. And obviously, people are out there willing to buy the tickets and willing to see the movies, but you have to make a more inclusive pipeline in order to get there, because this isn't just going to happen. There has to be a lot of intention.
Rita, remind me to get you involved in what we're doing with History Makers. We are documenting more histories, especially for people who are older who may, not be around much longer. We want to make sure we get them. And there's just remind me, History Makers.
I will. My mother
Karla. Wait, can I just say one
Okay.
thing that I just wanted to give you a quote. Oh, of course, I just lost it. But, recently we lost Agnes Varda, who was one of the great filmmakers, and she was a pioneer. And I just love this quote that she gave in this interview just a few years ago, 2 years ago. She said, "I am still alive, I am still curious, I am not a piece of rotting flesh," because she was 90 years old and she was still making movies and incredible movies. And I just, it's so insane. It's like she was just like, I'm just getting going. I can make the greatest stories, and when people discriminate, not again, forget being a woman, but against age, it's just stupid.
All of
She
it
made
is
two.
important.
I just want to say
Yeah.
she made 2 films within the last 3 years. One I don't think has come out yet, and Faces Places was, I think, nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah.
She got an honorary Oscar. She was so bright. I visited her in Paris. I visited her here. She would talk about something that I would say, "How do you know that it just came out?" And she said, "You have to check the internet every day." And she was just wonderful and just so brilliant. And the thing about her is Roger always said that if Agnes had been a man, she would have, they called her like the godmother of the French New Wave, and the grandmother. But they said they wouldn't have even said that. They would have just said she was one of their finest filmmakers.
Well, she said, I like this quote also, because they would say, "Oh, you're the only solitary female director in the Nouvelle, regime, whatever, in the filmmaking." And she said, was she treated differently? She goes, "No, I don't think so. I didn't see myself as a woman doing film, but as a radical filmmaker who was a woman." And she said, "I'm glad I'm a woman. I think I have the spirit, the intelligence, and dare I say, the soul of a woman."
Yeah.
I just had to throw her in there if we were talking.
Thank you. Karla.
Yes, ma'am. You want me to? Okay. So this is the thing. When Jennifer was talking about the disparity of women in film in general, it also trickles down to the world of film criticism. Because when I began to become a film critic, I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I barely saw any women, and I certainly barely saw any women of color. So I thought, this is a lane that I can do, because I know movies, I love movies, and I love talking about them. And I feel like, I was telling Jennifer this story before we came up on the panel. I was featured in an article in the LA Times where they talked about 10 underrepresented critics of color, of which I was one. The day that the article came out digitally, I was attending 3 screenings that day in a room full of film critics. Only 2 people talked to me that day. 2 out of a whole movie theater full of people that holds 1,000 people, and every seat was full. The 2 people that talked to me that day and offered me congratulations and said that they liked what I said in the article were Leonard Maltin and Ben Mankiewicz. Of all the people in the room, those are the only 2 people that said anything to me. And no one said anything to me because I said this in the LA Times.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Chaz knows, I don't bite my tongue. So what I said was, someone asked me about how I felt about being underrepresented, and I said that I felt like middle-aged white men feel like somebody's trying to take their place, trying to squash them down, trying to make them little, trying to make them disappear. Nobody's trying to make you go anywhere. All I'm trying to say is there needs to be more voices in the diaspora. When you have over 40% of the movie-going public being Black, Latino, and Asian, that needs to be represented in the voice of people that are talking about the films. We have 2 films coming out within the next 2 weeks. One is called Little. Now, Little's not going to be an Academy Award-winning film, but it's directed by Tina Gordon. It is produced by a 14-year-old child. The first time in history somebody 14 years old is producing a Hollywood film. It's produced by NBC Universal. Her name is Marta Martin, and you see her every week on Blackish. She's producing that film. It's starring an all-female cast: Marta Martin, Issa Rae, and Regina Hall, who just won for the first time in the 80-year history of the New York Film Critics Association the Best Actress Award. So, and Nia DaCosta is another filmmaker. She's coming out with a film called Little Woods, and her follow-up to that is the resurgence of Candyman with Jordan Peele. So there are female filmmakers out there. There are female film critics out there. You're looking at one. But we don't get an opportunity like our male counterparts do. With Little, I literally had to call out the people at NBC Universal because I wasn't invited to the junket. I wasn't invited to do any interviews. I had to email and go, hello, I'm a female film critic of color sitting over here. You got a film that's directed by a woman, a Black woman, and you got Black women in the cast. Like, really? But I bet you a whole bunch of middle-aged white men was sitting up in that junket and doing those interviews who could have cared less about Little, or could have cared less about the fact that a 14-year-old child is, producing the film. But I care, so let me write about it because I care. And the other thing is, I don't just care about Black film, I care about film, period. It doesn't matter to me who's in the movie. Let me go see a period film. Let me go see a film that features any kind of genre. I am not limited and I am not prejudiced in my opinion about film, period. And don't mistake the fact that because I am a person of color, that I am limited to stories of people of color. I am a film critic. That means I criticize film.
I want to just say something about how this looks behind the scenes, because this is all very good information. When I negotiate now as a director, I talk to people who tell me, and I'm not down on white males. Here's what's happening, though. It is hard to share the lakefront property. When you're out there and you're looking at the lake and you're like, this is my property. But the reality is nobody owns the lake. And it is something in which we have to get there. And when I'm negotiating with people behind doors, people say to me, I want you to direct the parts of the film I want you to direct. I'm going to have editorial control. And I say, it looks like you want to direct the film. You don't want a DGA director. And I lose opportunities when I stand there and say, that is not DGA sound. I can't direct under those conditions. If you're going to tell me what to do, and let's say the film is about a black man or a black woman, what you are really saying is you need a black person, but you don't really want a black person. I thought that ended some years ago, but it has not. And it is problematic. And so what you're seeing behind the scenes is really a lack of people saying, you're in the room. We're going to ignore you. We're not going to send you an email. And that is the fight that we have behind the scenes. But one thing I'm happy to say, with what Chaz is doing, with what more women are doing, we're beginning to see each other. And there's a groundswell, and we're working on that. But we need woke men, women, white, black, and everybody to see us trying to do this work. Because in the end, we're trying to tell your stories.
Absolutely.
Let's go. Great.
Can I just say one thing before you move forward, Chaz? So in the acting lane, I act as well, but I act primarily on television. And when the ladies were talking about how people come at you about, losing weight and all that, I had a situation on a TV show where I was cast as a guest star, and I was playing a prostitute. Big surprise there. And I had this costume, and they had me in this outfit where I'm busty, and so they had me in this outfit where my bust was ridiculously out, and they had this skirt that was ridiculously short. And I'm like, I'm not wearing this. And they asked me why, and I'm like, because you got 5 other people that are rail thin that look cute in this outfit, but I would not be one of them. So, I'm not wearing this. And I'm arguing with the costume designer as the producer's walking past the door. And he said, what's the problem? I said, the problem is I'm not wearing this outfit. That's the problem. And he was like, well, what do you want to wear? I'm like, I want to wear that outfit over there. He said, okay. But I took a chance because I could have got fired just for the simple fact I said I didn't want to wear that outfit. And that's something as actors you have to deal with every day. You have to make a decision as to whether you're going to speak up and speak out or, keep your mouth shut. So I just wanted to say that.
Right. Let's talk to,
Can I say something?
we have to let Michael Barker speak because we're almost out of time, and we have to also let the audience ask a few questions.
My apologies. My iPhone still had New York time on it. It's supposed to change. Mine did not change, so my apologies for that. Boy, there's a lot to talk about. First of all, I think the changes recently are gradual and they're happening, and they're not happening fast enough. However, as those changes are happening, you have to fight it every day. To be honest with you, Tom Bernard and I, we run Sony Classics since December of 91. And when we were celebrating our 25th anniversary, we met with the editor of Variety, Claudia Eller. And she said, we want to do something special, but we don't want to do the typical article about you guys celebrating an anniversary. So I need to peg it on something. And then a day later, she called me. I said, well, we've worked with female directors. A day later, she called me, and she said, Michael, do you realize you and Tom have worked with 58 female directors, many of them multiple times since you have been at Sony? And do you realize that all the companies combined have not worked with that? I said, no. And so they wrote this article, and Women in Film gave us some major award. We were kind of embarrassed because to be honest, I wish we could say we thought about that, but we really didn't. But then that's when the issue became clear to me. When I got that award, and Chaz was there, I remember looking at the audience and saying, this is the issue. The issue is with almost all of those directors, there are exceptions, very few. When a director, it was their first film or their second film or their first hit film, it was a nightmare, and sometimes it never came for them to have that second film. With the males, that was not the case. And that hit me like a brick. But the good news is, it's changing. You know, we had The Rider last year, and Chloe Zhao got a film at Fox, and then is going to do a Marvel film. I think it is changing because it's become an issue, but we have to fight it every day because a lot of times I'm considered a rabble-rouser with a lot of these trades where, you know, when the big Oscar issues and they say, these are the directors that should be considered for Best Director. Why is Nadine Labaki not considered? She's as good as any of those guys. Absolutely. Why is Chloe Zhao not in that list? I have to call and yell at people, and our staff has to call and yell at people to get them included? That shouldn't be. And Steve brought up Capernaum. Capernaum is one of the greatest films I've ever been involved with. It was an incredible experience. Nadine asked me to come to Beirut to help with the finish of the edit, and it's just an incredible film because there are no actors in the film except for her. But when the film had the world premiere in Cannes, I swear to you, some of those male critics, just like what you were talking, they started slamming the movie, and I was like, "How could you slam that?" When Chaz was there,
It was the best film I saw at Cannes. I think I remember.
And here is I've never said this before, but listening to what people are saying here, there was one guy, one critic, and he was at that party after the show, and he says, "I'm not sure how authentic it is." I said, "Why?" She says, "Look how beautiful she is. Look what she's wearing. She was an actress. She was a model. She was there." And I thought, you know what? No matter how gradual this stuff is happening, we have to fight it every friggin' day. And so I think it's good what's happened in the last year and a half. I also really miss Agnes Varda. You know, Agnes Varda gave me shit since the time I was 26. She was like, and I disagree with Roger. She didn't want the Hollywood studios. They wanted to wine and dine her. No, give me a freaking break. And when she got that governor's award a year and a half ago, I'll never forget. I thought, that's great. The Academy is changing. They're giving her that award, and she called me over, and I went over. I said, Agnes, it's really great. She said, Michael, here is what we have to remember. I said, what's that? You and I are enjoying this huge event, but you and I have not changed. And that's the last time I had an exchange with her. And I miss her, you know. Sometimes I think the real value of Ebertfest are the people we miss. It's almost like the grieving for the people we're really close to never ends. But the way we can do it here is to celebrate them. So I think we really need to celebrate Agnes because I tell you something, she did more than any person could have achieved in one lifetime. It was amazing.
If you come back in next year and bring some of her movies, we'll celebrate her. We'll make her the person for that.
Chaz, I just wanted to add, I was at that screening as well. That was one of the most thrilling experiences, was to see that film. And but you talk about memories and bringing people into the room, and there's one person I want to bring into the room. Having built the film center, and I was working on finishing a book, and I got a call from my father that he had been going through my grandmother's belongings. She had passed. And she was born in Poland. She left Poland and was not allowed into the United States, so she went to Cuba, where she met my grandfather, and they married, and they eventually did come to the States. But he found in her belongings what looked like a passport. And he opened it, and it was her picture, and it was her student ID from the film school in Poland in the 1920s.
Wow.
And next to it, he found her transcript. Direction, stage design, cinematography. Nobody in the family ever knew this.
Wow.
So this is a secret that she carried from Poland to Cuba to the States, and she never shared it.
Wow.
And the fact that we can be sitting here now, I just feel what she would have been able to bring into the world had these opportunities been there. And I'm so thankful for what's happened since then so that people are getting an opportunity.
And what she brought into the world was you, for you to carry it on. It's in your blood.
Well, I realized
right.
in that moment that everything that I had been doing in my life in the film center and in making films was a conversation with her.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, you had one thing.
I do. I'm looking to the future. I'm looking for ways, always, that we can seize on opportunities to improve anything. It's everything, even adverse situations, seem sometimes like an opportunity. I am the daughter of a union organizer. My mother was one of the founders of AFTRA. And I grew up singing union songs before I could talk. And I think that change now very much depends on our working together. We live in a, probably I would use the word obscenely competitive society and culture. And we need to change that. We need to learn really to respect each other and support each other in our work. And I think that that is happening. I think that there are a number of women, and I'm back on the women theme, if you'll forgive me, but I think there are a number of women who are beginning to work together, who are forming collectives and collaborative organizations to help each other produce, to help each other to advance in the business of movie making. And I think it's very important for all of us to acknowledge this and go with it, support it fully, always, and not buy into the old standards that we've been taught for years and years to follow. And that I think is just something we need to kind of personally take a pledge to do that. And work with each other. Approach each other, work with each other, respect each other. Me too. The time is now. These are all slogans and hashtags that do have meaning, and they do reflect a change, a seismic change that's occurring. We need to shake that up even more and bring it to reality.
But we also need to be really careful of what the new technologies, these mammoth new technologies, are bringing, because what scares me is what's the most important is going to a channel or these new technologies that provide volume as opposed to quality. I think the thing that we need is some place, whether it's a site or a magazine or whatever, that curates for the public what they guides. I want to be guided on what I can see.
Those are called critics.
Yes, they are. They are.
Sorry,
but
those
the
are called
critics.
critics.
I know, but the critics. The problem is the critics are going by the wayside. We need to deal with finding that platform where critics of real credibility and real integrity can speak, and the public know how to get there. That is what I'm saying. It's a real problem.
Everybody just come to awfj.org. That is exactly what we are doing. We just ran a memoriam to Agnes Varda. Marilyn Ferdinand is here. She organized our recent list of films that are...
and a spotlight tribute to Chaz.
What's that?
And the spotlight tribute to Chaz.
Tribute to Chaz. And every week we have a movie of the week. We have Capernaum was our movie of the week. And the Alice Guy Bachet film, Be Natural, is our upcoming movie of the week. We do this exactly, and we have very, very fine members, all of whom are very credible, very responsible, very respectful critics who have long track records. And please support our site. Please come and use our site as a platform.
Ebert.com should be definitely one of those.
RogerEbert.com.
Okay.
Ebert.com is owned by someone. I'm trying to buy that domain name. And people go to Ebert.com. It's RogerEbert.com. It is 11:30.
Where Chaz has
so
made
I have
a commitment to half of the reviews each week are written by women on RogerEbert.com.
Yes. Yeah, that was important. It's so we have to go, but our first panel was about addictions and getting rid of stigma in the arts and about addiction. It was almost like an AA meeting. And I, told you I'm 32 years sober. I'm going to just ask one question because we usually ask a question, get the audience time. We ran out of time. I'm going to ask a question that they ask at the end of an AA meeting. Does anyone have a burning desire to speak? Maryland.
Of course, we all miss Agnes Varda and her genius. I want to highlight one woman who is 87 years old, who is still making fabulous films. Her name is Marta Mészáros, and she is the Agnes Varda of Hungary. And she won an award at the Berlinade back in the 60s for a film called Adoption. And that's the only film that people seem to know, if they know her at all, which they don't. She came out with a film last year called Aurora Borealis. She came out with a film a couple of years before that called The Last Report on Anna. And they are both brilliant, brilliant films. She is not the only filmmaker of age who's still making films out there. We have some on the panel here. We really need to not forget that there are filmmakers all over the world. There's a list that somebody made called Directed by Women that has 16,000 women directors on it and counting. So you can find other people, and I just wanted to put in a plug for Marta Mészáros because I just love her films, and I hope you'll try and help me get them out.
Thank you. I'm going to have to, that's it. Please thank our panelists. And now we are going to break for lunch. Some of you who are donors, I think, oh my God, we were supposed to leave a little sooner so they can, I think they set up the lunch in here. So you'll come back. Is it here? Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right.